What is the research gap? What gap is your study going to fill? This is one of the questions that you're going to be asked by your professor or the defense panel when you present your work. You need to understand what a research gap is. And what exactly is a research gap? What do they mean when they say research gap? So you see that when you go and do any research, we are looking for new information. We are looking for information that is exclusively different from what is already existent. Because when you're doing your research, you are reviewing people's work. For example, in the literature review, you are looking at what other studies have found. So the question is, if other studies have done similar studies with the one that you are doing, why are you even doing it again? Otherwise, it would make sense for us to just conclude from the results of the studies that you are reviewing. We would just look at those studies and say, this is what we are going to find because other studies have already investigated that. So, by the virtue of the fact that you are reviewing other people's results, which are similar to your study, it means that another person has done something similar to your study. So, how are we going to make your study relevant? Okay, how are we going to make your study so important that even in the presence of other people's studies, your study is still relevant? What differentiates your study from all other people's studies? That is the research gap. And it is something that you should write clearly in your problem statement, the research gap. Let me give you an example. You could be investigating something and then you look at all the studies. So we want to look at the different studies that have been investigating for us to draw a difference, okay? So we need to, first of all, look at things like the study design. What study design did these other studies use? Maybe they used a quantitative study design, and you want to use a qualitative study design, which is going to help you draw more explorative themes and explanations from your respondents, and maybe you are going to get more in-depth information about the issue that you are investigating, other than this one who just did a quantitative study. Okay, so another gap can come from the study population. Maybe the people that the studies that you are reviewing were investigating a different group. Maybe they were investigating women, or they were investigating children, and now maybe you are doing the same thing, but you're investigating the elderly, or you're investigating men, or you're investigating another group of people. So that is the second one. A research gap can come from the study population. So a research gap can also come from the study setting. What is the nature of your study setting? You could be doing your study in a rural area, and yet the studies that you are reviewing were done in urban areas, okay? So it means that the results that you are going to get might be different from the existing ones, because the people in the rural areas might be facing the problem in a different way than the people who are in the urban area, even if the problem is the same. We could also go ahead and get a research gap from the sampling techniques. Somebody in the studies that you are trying to review could have used purposive sampling, which is full of bias, and could have chosen people with a lot of bias. And maybe for you, you are going to use something like simple random sampling, which doesn't have bias. So we are wanting to look especially at your methodology and the methodologies of these studies, and you look at the differences. What difference lies in the methodology of how these studies were done that is different from how your methodology is aligned, and that is where you're going to get your research gap. So you can always go through the methodologies of those studies, look at your methodology, and always look at the differences. Look at the differences in the study design, look at the differences in the study population, look at the differences in sampling, look at the differences in the way they calculated their sample sizes, look at the differences. The moment you find a very clear and distinct difference, that is going to be your research gap that you're going to talk about here in the problem statement, and give more credibility to your study and for people to continue reading your study.